Hi, my name is Elayna Foran, and I am the 150th Research Ambassador for Mount St. Vincent University. I've been on campus for about 6 years now in multiple different facets, and I am excited today to be interviewing Dr. Wayne Ingalls, who has been on campus for quite a while now. Would you like to introduce yourself to the camera there?
My name is Wayne Ingalls. I started at the Mount in it was 1973 and retired in 2006. And I held a variety of roles. But today we're focusing on the research office, which is what I established in 1974. So it was, and I was with the office for 17 years. So that's who I am.
So my first question is, what originally drew you to work at the Mount as opposed to any other institution?
It was a job. It was simple as that, because I had been working at Bishop's University in Quebec, and they brought in the CEGEP system and eliminated a year of university. And I was the last one in. And so I got a letter saying you're no longer required. And so I applied for a variety of jobs, and this was the one I got. That was I had never heard of the Mount before. So it wasn't something that I knew about the Mount, but anyway, obviously must have liked it because I stayed here for a long time.
Absolutely. Can you describe the positions that you held within the research office? I know there was couple of different titles and that kind of thing.
Yeah, there were different titles. I basically the basic title was Director of Research. And when I set up the office, and then after that, when Margaret Fulton came, I became Director of Research and Special Projects. And I've always described special projects as gleams in Margaret's eye. So she would want to get something done, and I'd be the guy who would try and find the money and make it happen. And then after that, I was appointed. I think it was assistant to the president for. I think it was Research and Information Services, and what basically that meant, the research office always tagged along. But I was in charge of this building, and I was responsible for the units like the library and so on within the building. And the whole idea was to try and make those days the librarians and computer people get along well, which was a challenge initially. But anyway, that happened, and then after that really sort of ended it, because after that I then was appointed vice president academic. And so I didn't bring the research office along with me because I had other things to do. So and somebody else was appointed. So,
what changes did you observe within your time in the research office from conception till when you left to the academic office?
I guess the major thing, when I started out, there was nothing. So we started from scratch. And we developed policy. We had a committee, a presidential committee. We would recommend grants. We had a little bit of internal money. Started with $1,000 internal money. That's all we had. The volume of research increased substantially because we were encouraging people to do it. And I should say that the idea of the research office was actually the brainchild of the dean of the time. And when I came as an assistant dean because there was one dean for the whole faculty, and I was her assistant, and then this other person came in, and his idea, he wanted to improve the quality of the university and expand the offerings. And so to improve the quality, he wanted a research office to encourage faculty to do research. And so that's basically why that was set up. So over time, the volume and stuff increased. but so did the external money. Now, for example, the support that the university gets for indirect costs, that didn't exist in those days. And so I was also involved in CARA, which is the Canadian Association of Research Administrators, for a number of years, and I was president of that too. Anyway, that was a body that you got to know people in Ottawa who had money to give you and what have you, so you could bring that kind of information back. And that sort of just expanded over, and basically what I'm saying is in the time, it was expansion more than anything else. But it never was more than me and a secretary who was a secretary to me and all the other things that I was doing in my spare time. So it wasn't, the office didn't, but it was the volume of research that the faculty did and their success and all that really changed over the years.
That's wonderful. One kind of off-topic question that I had is, can you describe your teaching and research in the history department outside of the research office?
Oh, sure. I'm actually a classical scholar, which means Greece and Rome and Greek languages and all that kind of stuff. Anyway, so that's what my background is, and I did ancient history, and when I came here, that's what I started teaching. But and so I continued to teach ancient history, but I added the history of childhood. At that time, the history of childhood was required by child study program, and so we had this audience of, I think there were there were 2 classes of 75, I think. So that's basically what I did. And then as a result of that, I got interested in childhood in Greece. And so I published several papers on that particular thing. So that's where my research went from historical research that I'd done earlier. So anyway, so.
Tell me about a memorable time when MSVU research impacted the community.
Well, it's funny. I have 2 answers, I guess. The first one, the community is not this community, it's the scholarly community of Canada. And there was a person by the name of Patrick O'Neill, who was a theater scholar, and he published widely. He used to go all the time to England, and he figured out a way to find Canadiana in the British Library. So he unlocked, he found a key. I don't know what it was, but what it meant was that any Canadian researcher who looking for Canadian material in the British Library could unlock it, find it, because of what Patrick did. And that, so that's an impact that's a large impact. But the other one that I would think of is Janice Keefe and the research that she's done, because Janice has done I think a tremendous job, and she is in the community. She's very active in the community, and I know that's something that's an impact that I think I would recognize.
Absolutely. I've spoken with Janice, and so has my colleague Liz, and she's absolutely wonderful, and her research is terrific. Yeah. In reflecting upon the 150th anniversary of MSVU as an institution, where do you see the future of this university progressing?
I simply see it getting stronger and stronger. I don't think it's certainly not going to grow in size. I think it's a kind of optimal size for what it is. And I think it will have a greater impact because, again, it's research that people will pay attention to you if you have a research record. If you're someone who's published something and knows something, then there will be a public response to that in some ways. And I think the Mount will, because of what it's doing and the way it's going about it, I think that'll just it'll get bigger and better. But apart from that, I don't see any great change. Although I would comment on one thing that I will smile about a little. There was a faculty member, I remember at a meeting, who once commented that the Mount would be a success if it no longer needed to exist. And he was looking forward to that day, and everyone else around the table went, "Oh, my God, we built a jobs." But I think that's a relevant point.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally get what they're saying with that, and it's very pertinent even today.
Yeah.
Of the initiatives that you oversaw at MSVU during your time here, such as the creation of the EMF Communication Center, which we are in right now,
Right.
which one stands out as the most memorable?
I would say probably that was it. But there are two other things that I would like to that you might find more so. The first is that I wrote the proposal for the chair in women's studies. Okay, Margaret Fulton took it to Ottawa and sold it, but I was the guy that wrote the proposal. And secondly, I was the Secretary of Senate when we were setting up the institute. It was the very first institute we set up, so we had to get through all the policies and all that kind of stuff. And I had to shepherd that through. And I think that was the result of that has been a pretty impressive body that's done a lot of good work.
Definitely. As a member of that body currently, it's definitely something that I see all the time, and it's so wonderful that it has progressed so far, and that's one thing that has developed in such a way that it really creates the Mount what it is.
Yeah.
What would you tell your past research self?
About what?
Are there things that you know now that when you first started your job as a student or job in the research office, things that you wish you could go back and tell yourself?
Actually, no. I mean, it was an interesting job because I just kept learning all the time, and I don't ever remember. I guess I don't think back very much about things like that, and I have no regrets about anything, and so I can't imagine there are things that I know that I wouldn't that have nothing to do with this, but from the research perspective, I don't think would say there's very much.
And my last question here is, do you have any advice for incoming Mount researchers?
I guess my first comment would be that it's important to maintain a strict focus on research because it's so easy in a university. I mean, teaching is important and it takes time and it takes energy and all of that stuff, but you also have to do research, and that's a very significant part, should be a very significant part of your life. And it's so, if you're someone starting out, I mean, the first year you're kind of overwhelmed with all the teaching and all that stuff. And there's also the committees and the service that all that plays into it as well. And they all have interesting aspects, but it takes a kind of persistence to do research. And I don't care, people, for a long time I was involved in trying to get money for small universities because small universities have a weaker research profile than the big places. The argument is that it's harder to do research in a small university. Well, it is, but it's not. I mean, you can make contact with people around the world. You can do all kinds of things, and don't limit yourself to where you are and what you're doing. I think that would be what I would say.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
You're most welcome.
I really appreciate you coming here today and talking with me about the Mount and its history and where it's going, and it's just really great to have you here.
Thank you very much. Been a pleasure.